Xbox is on its last console generation? Hey guys, it's Jeremy here, and today I wanted to talk about something that's particularly interesting based on a recent comment that Microsoft made about the Project Scorpio. Project Scorpio is the last generation of consoles for Microsoft. Now that doesn't mean necessarily what you think it means. I thought it was a very interesting thing, but essentially the term generation refers to the fact that when the Xbox came out, the original Xbox came out, you could play Halo 2 on it, Halo 1, you could play all those games. It was its own thing, it had its own user interface and stuff like that. But on Xbox 360, you could play some games on the Xbox 360 that you could play on the Xbox by using the same disc. Backwards compatibility was a thing, so people were able to just play older games on it sometimes. Again, that actually wasn't for every single game. That only covered some games. And when the Xbox 360 went to the Xbox One, it didn't carry over all of the downloaded games you have, because when the Xbox One came out, none of your games from before worked on the new console platform, because obviously it's a different console and it's not supposed to be optimized for that, for all sorts of games. But what's interesting is that they say that they're done with console generations now. Now, the real thing that this means, it doesn't mean that they're done making consoles. It doesn't mean they're not going to make new consoles. It means that as opposed to throwing away your gamers from the previous generation, instead of having to have people transfer over between generations, it's not going to be like that anymore. It's going to be like PC gaming, which is something I've already said should happen. And what that means is that when a PC comes out, you buy a PC, you buy a nice high-end PC, and then a couple years down the road you upgrade it because it becomes out of date and it's not as effective at playing video games anymore. That's just how it goes. And that's essentially the same thing that's happening with Xbox now, because Microsoft has already said that the Xbox One and the Xbox Scorpio will all be able to play the same game. So I assume what they actually mean by this is that going forward, everything will be compatible for everything. Games that come out 10 years from now that aren't even necessarily on the Xbox, whatever the fuck it's going to be by then, you'll still be able to play on the Xbox One, because starting from the Xbox One forward, everything is going to be compatible with everything. Of course, games like Halo 5 Guardians and things like that will be considered low-end games and just dated, obviously. It'll be like playing Gary's mod now, and the Xbox One will just be the worst console to play games on because it will be the least powered. This is an interesting thing to me because this is something that I've thought for a long time. And this also further leads credence to the fact that the Xbox Scorpio may very well be upgradable. Either it will be upgradable or it'll actually be that they are going to iteratively release new consoles. Now, a lot of people are going to say this is a bad thing because people don't want to have to keep buying consoles all the time and having to keep up with the technology and things like that. But I don't really see it that way, because for the longest time we saw consoles as a one-time purchase for about 8 years, or realistically 5 years. Cycles were typically 5 years. But you'd buy a new console every 5 years and you'd get to play all the games that came out for that, and then the next console would come out and it'd be even more powerful, and then you'd play games on that. But I think that Microsoft is pushing towards a much more open and, like I said, PC framework. And this is a great thing for gaming, because if Sony follows the trend on this too, it basically means that anyone who has a PS4 or a PS5 or whatever the fuck they come out with, or PlayStation Neo even, it's not gonna matter. You're gonna be able to play the games with your friends no matter what console you're using. It's just going to be a matter of how much power you want and how much money you want to invest in it. And that's something that's amazing, because the idea of choice in the industry is something that we've needed for a long time, because typically you're stuck with a box for years, and if you sell it, you're throwing away the value of something that you paid for, and not really getting much out of it. You really don't get nearly the value for selling it at GameStop. Basically, nowadays, your dollar is going to go a lot further, and there's not going to be upgrading to the next generation of consoles. It's just going to be, instead of it being, hey man, you should get an Xbox One so we can play games together, it's going to be, hey man, you want to get on this game? Yeah, even though one person may be on the Xbox Scorpio, and one person may be on the Xbox 50, whatever the fuck you want to call it, it's not going to stop them from playing games together. It's just going to mean that people's performances are going to vary. And that's perfectly fine. That's actually fantastic. That's a great thing. That's exactly what we need. You may not necessarily agree with this opinion, but that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you guys so much. I will see you guys in the next week, because I'm uploading these every day that ends with Friday. Begins with Friday.